Welcome to the Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics Podcast. Rhys Tiller, Chris Allen. Chris, how goes it?
It goes great, fellas. I'm happy to sit down and get another chance to talk with you guys. What is this, my third time, fourth time? Regardless, I'm happy to sit down and have the chance to talk with you both again, man. How y'all doing?
We're pretty good.
I'm doing better than he is because I don't have to go to school. But
that's true.
You're going to the school of life, Dad. Don't worry.
I understand the pace for you, but that's a different story. Chris, I wanted to make sure I give you kudos for helping out Rhys's book and helping him learn and all that good stuff. So thank you.
Oh, of course, anytime. And we were talking before the show started. I happened to be in Canton with Rich Rebar, who also had a chance to edit the book, and both of us agreed that while we're helping Rhys out right now, we're most likely going to be working for him at some point in the near future. So we appreciate, putting our, helping you get your name out there. So keep us in mind once you take over the fantasy industry.
Don't worry. Once I see Chris Allen on an application, I'll say yes.
Just make sure it's the right one. Sure it's the right one. There are a lot of imposters out there.
Exactly.
But you guys are very gracious, and it's very kind of you. It's great to have friends, man. Isn't it? It's great to have friends.
Yeah. Anything I can do to help, though, for sure.
Speaking of you talking with Rich over the weekend, how was the expo?
Oh, my gosh. One of the things that I know we actually talked about this, I think the last time we got on a call, was that one of the things about being in the fantasy industry is that we're all a part of social media in some way, shape, or form. Whether you're just a casual viewer, you just watch the timeline tick by, you're on Twitter constantly arguing with people, whatever the case may be. Everybody sees what happens and the drama that ensues on Twitter almost on a daily basis. There was none of that there in Canton. Absolutely none of that. For 3 days, Friday to Sunday, and I think some folks wound up having to stay until yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, not an ounce of drama. 450 some odd analysts, fans of fantasy football and all that, all congregated in Canton for 3 days. I heard not a lick of arguments, no quotes or subtweeting, no hot takes, no nothing. It was everybody just coming together as a community to be together, have a few drinks, have a few laughs, share a few meals together. And it really was, I was telling people this before we even showed up. I could have gone the whole weekend without talking not 1 ounce of fantasy football because I just wanted to see my friends and people that I'd been associating with since I've been a part of the industry. And it was exactly that. It met expectations and then some. So I highly encourage anybody that has the ability to come out to Canton in the future years that Bob is going to continue to do this, just for that experience. To see they had big names there, don't get me wrong. The Rich Rebars, the Denny Carters, the Mike Clays, the Andy Barons of the world, so on and so forth. They were all there, sure. But just to meet the people that you associate with on a daily basis, your friends, your clique, the people that you work with, just being able to see those folks and talk with them, I think is just an invaluable experience. And I encourage everybody to do the same.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the big names. Who did you fanboy the most after?
Probably, I would say the guy that I've said probably 2 or 3 guys. Rich was definitely one of them because I try and model my writing style and conversational style after Rich, because I'm very much I approach this from an analytical perspective, but I do understand that most folks don't really get this deep in the weeds as I tend to do. And also it's the job of anybody that does write from an analytic standpoint to also be able to relate to somebody that doesn't care not one iota about analytics. And I think Rich, in his ability to turn a phrase, is one of his best tool bags, one of his tricks in his tool bag, because we all know how deep he can go in terms of looking at studies, creating splits and trying to better understand every single position that goes into fantasy football production. But his ability to connect with somebody that has a PhD to somebody that never even stepped foot on a collegiate campus, it's ridiculous how easy it is for him to relate to somebody, regardless of how interested you are in fantasy football or not. So being able to sit and just talk with him for a while and conversate with him and just listen to how he's approaching the game or whatever, just awesome. And the same with Denny, just being able to see Denny like in person and the guy behind all of the bits and the takes and all that you see on Twitter. It's so great to like, those were the two people I think like when I saw them, I was just like, I have to walk by and like, shake their hand and introduce myself. And both of them recognized me, but it was still just one of those, like, I remember almost right after the conversation happened, I was texting my wife and I was just like, I just saw Denny Carter. I was just talking with Rich Rebar and just all those things. She was like, you're so cute. I'm like, I'm not talking to you anymore. But those two guys, I think, were the most the guys that I wanted to see the most, at least from that standpoint, just from a fan standpoint, for sure.
Rich is the man. He was on last week, and like yourself, he is so gracious. He's like one of those guys, even if we never talk football, you'd want to hang out with for a weekend. Just to chill with. But he has most of the phrases we use in fantasy football. I say most, but like the Konami code, and which is the running quarterbacks, all that stuff. That's Rich Rebar. Mm-hmm. Rich is the one that coined all that stuff, and it's amazing.
Yes,
and he does it so effortlessly.
Yeah, that's the thing that cracks me up almost every time that I hear him say something or come up with some sort of quip. I'm just like, how does he do that? Like time and time again. So just seeing him in person was great.
You mentioned like having a few drinks and having some laughs. Who was the most memorable out of all those experiences?
Actually, to be quite honest, the most memorable portion was sitting down with the rest of the Football Guys staff. Oh. I know that we were there. So we got there Friday night and went out with some folks. Saturday was busy because I was a part of the Kings Classic draft. And then we went to like essentially an after party, like before the actual expo on Sunday. But my most memorable portion was being able to sit down and have a meal with the Football Guys staff that was there. It was myself, some of the quote unquote young guns, as Joe Bryant calls them, Troy King, Dave Kluge, Adam Wilde, Sam Wagman, a few other folks like Danny. I cannot remember his last name. Starts with a T. I can't pronounce it off the top of my head, but also works for Football Guys. A couple other folks that work in customer service. And so it was like maybe 8 to 10 of us. Pat Fitzmaurice also showed up. So about 8 or 9 of us that were there. And when you're in a big crowd and everybody's hanging out, it's fun, but you don't really get a chance to talk with everybody. You don't really get a chance to find out who they are as a person. And so that experience on Saturday evening gave me the chance to sit down and talk with Joe and talk with a couple other folks that I'd never really met that were part of the Football Guys staff, and just learn about who they are as people, where they come from, got family, and all that other stuff, that just conversations we don't typically have when we're sitting there talking in base camp.
So I if you know me, I have a unique sense of humor and I love irony. I love irony that you're talking about how memorable it was with the Football Guys staff as you're wearing your 4x4 hoodie and your Football Guys hat right behind you. I think that's awesome because you are every site that has fantasy football content, that's the highest level of fantasy football content, you're a contributor, it seems like. I mean, I'm waiting for you to spin up your own network and just have your own, affiliates.
At some point, maybe, but I think it's just, this is enough fun for me where I know folks that, I know folks like you both and Joe and Sig and like everybody else. I just like being a part of this community so much that, hey, if you're going to give me a few bucks to come and write for you, I'll be there. I'll write a couple pieces here and there just so I can hang out with everybody. So this is fun enough for me for right now.
I'm with you. Sorry to bust your chops too much.
No. And I keep bothering Joe about the whole swag thing because I'd be wearing a Football Guys hoodie or t-shirt or something, but he even admitted that because of all the stuff that we've been doing to the new site and all that, all the other stuff has been pushed off to the right. And he was actually wearing a pair of shoes that had the Black Eyed Joe on the top of the shoes. I was like, I want those shoes, man. Like, just give me that. But it's all that stuff. Like, they haven't been able to buy more. So it's just, this is the best I've got right now is the hat. But as soon as there's more merch available, I'll be repping that, like, for sure.
I got some XXL stuff for you.
I'll take it at this point. I mean, I'll figure out a way to shrink it down maybe to my size or something like that. I don't know, man. I'll figure it out.
I've tried. I have a lot. When we meet up next time, I'll try to drag some stuff out for you.
All right, I'm in.
That's a promise.
All right.
So let's transition to the actual football instead of the conversation, even though it's
All right.
a lot more fun. Who stood out to you during the preseason openers that were happening last week?
The rookie quarterbacks. I think those were the guys that stood out the most. I mean, don't get me wrong. Was I mildly surprised about Ramondre Stevenson's 91-yard touchdown or whatever that showcased some of the breakaway speed, which I didn't think that he necessarily had, because if I'm remembering correctly from his collegiate profile, he ran either I believe it was a 4.68 40 coming out of college. So I didn't really expect to see that breakaway speed, but a 91-yard touchdown but as a part of 127 yards total. That means on the other carries, he was really only running about four yards per carry, prior to the 91-yard touchdown. So, but it's good to know that he at least has breakaway speed, in his bag of tricks. But all of the rookie quarterbacks, from Trey Lance, looking great. Justin Fields looked great. I mean, all of them. I mean, they really showcased why they were picked the way that they fell, in the draft. Even going back to my pre-draft takes, would I still have wanted Justin Fields to be a part of the 49ers? Absolutely. But Trey Lance uncorking that 60-yard touchdown that he threw, Justin Fields, even though there might have been some accuracy issues, I do think that was more part of the fact that he was playing with not Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney out there in the field. So I think that was a larger part of the reason why he didn't have it as high of a completion percentage during that preseason game. That's fine. But seeing each of them out there, seeing how poised they were, Mac Jones being able to connect with some of his receivers, even when he was playing with the second team. I remember watching a clip where it was a end zone shot about 30 or so yards out. He put it where only the receiver could get it, but it was the second team receiver. I can't remember his name, Zach Wilkinson, if I'm not mistaken. But wound up dropping the ball afterwards. The receiver couldn't make the play. So it's just seeing them being able to operate in each of their own offenses and not really seeing any sort of concern for any of them, to be quite honest. I don't think I heard any sort of issues in terms of not being able to maneuver in the pocket, complete accuracy issues, throwing just awful interceptions, any of the things or bugaboos that you might associate with rookie quarterbacks coming out. So all of them being first rounders, or at least the ones that we consider to be at least have fantasy importance for this year, and some folks are still drafting them for redraft purposes this year. It was good to at least see from a preseason perspective that they come out showing that they could actually be useful for us for fantasy in their first season.
All right, I have a question for both of you, and I'll let Rhys go first. What's the percentage that one or both of those two NFC rookie quarterbacks, Fields and Lance, makes it to the NFC title game
this year?
Yes,
5%. 5 to 10%.
The NFC's down though.
Yeah.
So,
but the 49ers, I'm sorry, but I don't trust the Bears. But the Niners have to deal with the Seahawks, they have to deal with Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and the entire Rams team.
That's fair. But the NFC without Drew Brees is debilitated.
Yes.
The NFC East, it depends if you like the Cowboys or not, but really outside the Cowboys, that division's not really a threat.
You have to play defense to be a threat, I think.
Exactly. So the Packers for Fields, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really give the Vikings that much stroke, but maybe the NFC West. How about you, Chris? What do you think the chances one or both make it to that NFC title game?
One of them, yeah, I'd have to agree with Rhys. I'd give it max 10%. But for both of them to be able to make it, either of their divisions are just too strong at this point for me to see both of them being able to make it out. I will say that at least for the 49ers, their overall strength of schedule just does point to them at least being able to have a decent playoff seeding, assuming they wind up coming out on top throughout most of their games. But I mean, Rhys laid out the good point. They still have to contend with the Rams. They still have to contend with, they still wind up having to contend with either Seattle or Arizona. I mean, both powerful offenses. And I think if the Rams, they're the team really that you need to beat, because we already know their defense is good. The question is really just around their offense. So while I think the 49ers offense is one that will be the most explosive, I still think their defense has enough in them, assuming Bosa's back healthy at the start of the season. I think they're the ones that I would probably say has the better chance to wind up making it into playoffs. But man, it's really tough for me to see both of them making it.
Never know. It's interesting that the other three rookies are in the AFC, right? You know, two in the AFC East, and then Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if the other three, the AFC guys are. I mean, I can't see any of those guys doing much this year. I mean, with their teams making a playoff round.
Honestly, you could make the case for the Jaguars like making it out. They probably got the best shot. I mean, they play against the Texans, who's a dumpster fire. They play against them twice. Tennessee also has a bad defense, so you could at least possibly see them going 500 against Tennessee. If I'm not mistaken, their passing schedule doesn't look too terrible. Darrell Bevell, their new offensive coordinator, they play up in pace, neutral passing as well. So at least that should showcase some of Trevor Lawrence's strengths. They've got Marvin Jones, who's connected to Barrow from his time in Detroit. We'll see how well. I mean, their offensive line has been one of the more revamped units like in the team. If I'm remembering, Brandon Thorne, who does consulting work for Established to Run, he had put them at like 13th, 14th, or 15th, somewhere in there in terms of his offensive line rankings. So assuming everything works out, Trevor Lawrence, we know him to be at least a accurate passer, also mobile.
Yeah,
has a good offensive line in front of him. Good passing, good weapons in the passing game with Shenault, Shark, and Marvin Jones. Good stable of running backs. Don't know what you guys think about ETN, but I mean, James Robinson showed to be fairly good as well. So like the pieces are there. So out of all of the other like AFC rookie quarterbacks, I think Lawrence has the best shot.
Can I take this one, Rhys?
Go right ahead.
All right. First of all, I like Carlos Hyde in there too. The one thing, my caution about Lawrence is Urban Meyer. I think that guy can't get out of his own way. The strength coach, and I'm a Tebow fan. I mean, I think he gets way too much diss in this world. Everybody's jealous of him. And you look at it. He took over when they were 1-4, took them to the playoffs, took them deep into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And he got cut, just like the process should say, leave that roster spot for someone else.
Yeah.
Fine. But I just think Urban Meyer he can't get out of his ego's way. He thinks he's Belichick, and Belichick's earned that right. You know what I mean? And,
hey, you're preaching to the choir here, because I live out in Ohio. So we watched Ohio State go from, at least I was more of a Jim Tressel guy, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And so seeing the program go from him to Urban Meyer, and then everything that happened like shortly afterwards, it's like I was actually kind of glad that the Ohio State moved on from Urban Meyer, because I was never really a huge fan of him. I mean, he was able to bring in and keep Ohio State being like one of the better like recruiting schools and bringing good prospects union and keep the program going well. But as a person, as a guy, just like I can't root for him as much.
All right, Rhys, I ask you this because you have a good memory. Let me stage it this way. I think it's different when you're a college coach and those guys are young guys and they have to hang on to it.
Yeah.
Hang on your word, versus in the pros, you're almost peers, right? You're like,
yeah,
that Joe Judge way in the Giants. I don't think that's going to fly, right?
No, I can
verbally abusing. When was the last time we saw a college coach make that spring into the pros and do well? Can you think of any?
Probably, if you give me enough time.
I was thinking Harbaugh was decent as a college coach.
Yeah. But then once he went to San Fran, he lost as a college head coach, as Michigan's not been relevant. They've been kind of relevant, but they haven't been that good.
Yeah, it's not been
Pete Carroll, maybe?
Pete Carroll is probably the best option.
But I just meant there's been a lot that failed.
Yep. Yeah. Chip Kelly, Steve Spurrier.
Nick Saban.
Yeah. Nick Saban. Yep.
Yeah. But you talk about how they need to clean the Urban Meyer back in college, but how they're nearly peers. But keep in mind, Tom Brady has a quarterback coach. Joe Montana had a quarterback coach. And they also have a lifeguard at the Olympics. So
I hear you. All I meant though is when you're a pro coach, like Byron Leftwich, right? He talks to those guys like they're peers. Like, hey guys, here's what I need you to do. You don't bark orders at them. And you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's just different because these are grown men. You think Byron Leftwich and Tom Brady are close to the same age.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say something, but I won't.
That they're younger than me, that'd be true.
You mentioned the highs of the preseason. What have been some of the lows and disappointments for you?
One of the lows of the preseason is not really having some of my like questions answered regarding like usage for some of the big name players. I was actually, not to name drop or anything like that, but I was talking with Rich Rebar at the expo, and he laid out pretty much the two main. Well, I think there are three. I argued with him about a second, but I think there are three main questions like for the fantasy football season for 2021. First question is, does Austin Eckler get goal line carries? Preseason usage so far kind of dictates that that's not going to be the thing. They were using either Joshua Kelly or Larry Roundtree, like once they got in close to the goal line. Second question is Antonio Gibson going to get more passing work? That didn't seem like that was going to be the case during the preseason. J.D. McKissick was subbed in like on some of those situations for Washington. The third for me is Clyde Edwards-Helaire going to be involved in the passing game more? And I think that's more TBD. But I mean, those are the three things. And that was kind of where I was hoping to see a bit more, either one way or the other, if we're going to like get those answers, like get those questions definitively answered. And I was left with more questions than anything else. While I think everybody's just rushing to say, oh, well, you have to start drafting J.D. McKissick in like the 10th round because Antonio Gibson isn't going to get the third down work. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do all that. Or you have to like, don't leave your draft without Joshua Kelly or Larry Roundtree. It's like, I don't know about all that, because Austin Eckler was fine on his receptions like last season from a points per game basis in PPR leagues. So I'm not rushing to judgment. I'm just hoping we get more data before the actual game start here in 3 weeks or so.
But you mentioned going after McKissick. I think the bigger storyline in there is Antonio Gibson worth the top 12 pick, top 14 pick that he's going at right now if he's not going to get third down work? Because he's not getting the Derrick Henry 325 carries, and he's not getting the passing work of Alvin Kamara or even Aaron Jones. So why would...
It's because he had a lot of touchdowns last year. If you remember, Rhys, you and I were sitting there, the girls in our family were awesome, and you and I were watching that Thanksgiving night game, and he lit up the Cowboys with 3 touchdowns. And Gibson lit it up. Now I got a loaded question for you, Chris.
All right.
Is it past time to give up on Myles Gaskin?
Past time? I don't know, but that clock is a ticking. Not gonna lie. It's hard for me to think, because like with the Antonio Gibson and Austin Eckler thing, it wasn't so stark or like a complete contrast in usage that we have to completely bail out on both of those guys. But 14-4 in terms of like preseason usage for between Malcolm Brown and Myles Gaskins, or something like fairly close to that, that's concerning. 0 goal line work, that's concerning. And Malcolm Brown was also subbed in on third down and obvious passing situations as well. Also concerned. It's like those 3 strikes. I mean, how else does Myles Gaskin have any sort of fantasy value, or at least enough fantasy value to prop up his 4th, 5th, 6th round ADP, depending on which platform that you're using to draft on? I can't really see that happening. On top, put that on top of the fact that Miami's offensive line is below average in terms of either run blocking or pass blocking. We're already expecting to see more out of the passing game in general, with Tua looking like much more accurate as a passer. The way that they've made their offseason moves, I mean, moving for like Waddle, Fuller, so on and so forth, bringing in Hunter Long as well. So it's just, I'm having a hard time seeing how Gaskin has like any sort of value from a fantasy perspective, unless he's just one of those guys that drops like a rock into like the double-digit rounds or something like that.
Yeah, and also it's going to be game-to-game variability, which makes it even more infuriating at a high cost.
Right.
It's sort of like how the Bucs receivers are going to be this year.
I think even the Bucs running backs.
Yes, both. Yeah.
We're just brought up the Bucs running backs, but what are some of the position battles, especially at quarterback, that need to be settled this preseason, and are you looking forward to being settled this preseason?
The only one that I can think of that has to be settled is the Patriots quarterback position. Like, we have to know what type, like, who's going to be the week 1 starter. And I was actually just the article I'm writing up now for NBC Sports Edge is actually like looking back over the last week of training camp reports. And the report that came out today was Cam Newton saying that Bill Belichick has yet to name the week 1 starter, even after, multiple reports have said that both of them have struggled during the joint practices they've been having with Philly. Mac Jones came out during the preseason, looked good. We already talked about him, but overall, still looked like a rookie with more improvements that still need to be made. So there hasn't been any sort of definitive, even in the court of public opinion, we don't have a real clue as to who's going to be the starter for the Patriots. So it's difficult for us to say whether or not, Cam Newton should be the starter, Mac Jones should be the starter. But we need to know, because the stylistic differences between the two could not be more stark. We know that Cam Newton, while he can have his days of being an accurate quarterback, he's been 20th or worse in terms of completion percentage over expected in 4 out of the last 5 seasons. It's been since 2018 that he's actually been considered a quote unquote accurate passer. And that was the year after they actually wound up going to the Super Bowl. So it's just, all right, I want to pull for Cam Newton, but in this offense that they've already put together, it just seems like the Patriots are waiting for the archetype of player to put in that they had with Tom Brady. Not that they're expecting to get Tom Brady, but the archetype of that player, a player that can stand in the pocket, assess the defense, get the ball out fairly quickly, move on to the next play. That task-oriented nature that was very inherent to Tom Brady in the way that he played, that's exactly the way that Mac Jones plays, but he doesn't play at that speed yet, still a rookie. So it just seemed the way that Mac Jones operated in the pocket during the preseason game, that's exactly what the Patriots need. That's exactly the way that they've, positioned their entire organization, because they had one of the best passers in the league for, 18 years or something like that. So while I'd say that I'm pulling for Cam Newton, it just does really seem like Mac Jones is the future, but that future is more like the near future rather than the 2022 future. But we won't know until Bill Belichick makes a decision.
So you mentioned quarterbacks with contrasting styles. I think there's also New Orleans similar, because there's a big difference with Taysom Hill and Winston, as well as Rhys's Broncos. I think there's a big difference between check down Teddy and let's throw it deep to Drew Lock, who's to me, when I see Drew Lock play, I feel like I'm watching a younger Jay Cutler. Let's just rip this ball in as much as possible. Yeah. Why don't you give us your take on those guys?
So with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, I would 100% agree, Jeff, that stylistically those guys can't be farther apart, because we just watched Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina. From a fantasy production standpoint, we were essentially happy with all of the guys that played for Carolina. He wound up supporting not 1, not 2, but 3 different pass catchers that all went over 1,000 scrimmage yards during that season. Carolina was actually, if I'm not mistaken, the 12th or 13th in terms of offensive yards per drive. But the sticking point with Teddy was that he could never finish drives. His red zone efficiency has been one of the key sticking points for him. Even going back to when he was in New Orleans and he took over for Drew Brees, he could operate an offense between the 20s, almost fairly similarly to how Drew Brees did, or to how Cam Newton did when he took over for him when he went to Carolina. It's just that when it came to the red zone, offensive red zone efficiency completely dropped off once they got inside the 20s, because he can't function under pressure. That's been his thing. Their offensive efficiency for Carolina, for the Saints, dropped off to well below average. They were either 22nd or 23rd in red zone efficiency. Same thing with Carolina. While I just talked about their offensive yards per drive being well above average, their points per drive were well below average. And we saw that in the fact that they were falling behind in so many games. They were barely able to sustain drives, or finish drives rather. And so I can see that being the same case for him in Denver. Whereas with Drew Lock, it's not necessarily the fact that he can't finish drives, it's that he can't sustain drives, because it's either his accuracy. We've seen a number of folks talk about the fact that his mechanically, his fundamentals as a passer are one of the issues that he's had since coming out of college. it's not just the way that he points, like where he points his toes, the way he's like moves his hips in order to move, like actually like put his body in a position to throw it to the wide receiver. He has the arm strength for sure. It's just like these like parts and pieces of his game that have mechanically made him like less of an accurate quarterback. And we saw that even in his rookie season. Like while he would have these highs, we could also see like the number of interceptions that are coming just like right around the corner, like for him. Yeah. So it's just, while I'm rooting for Teddy, because I've been a Teddy fan like since he came out of college, and I was like hoping to see more of him like when he was in Minnesota. It's just, they need, like, the Broncos are like in one of the worst divisions to have I would say a game manager or quarterback. How are you supposed to get out of that division when you're playing against Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes like twice a year? It's almost impossible at that point. I mean, I don't care about Derek Carr as much, but it's just, it's hard to see like the Broncos even competing at that point when we know on paper the rest of that roster is actually pretty rock solid. I mean, on both sides of the ball too. I mean, their corners, their outside corners, so two of the best in the league. Interior pass rushers with Chubb and Von Miller, also like one of the best duos in the league. And then on the offensive side, I mean, where do you want to like pick your poison? You got Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant. I mean, they just drafted Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. I mean, just Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler. I mean, there's so many offensive weapons that are associated with Denver, but then you're stuck with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater quarterback. That's why I was almost hoping that that whole Aaron Rodgers stuff, that would like he would have moved to Denver, and then just that would have been like just absolute chaos. I mean, that division would have been chaos. Having a elite quarterback with that offensive line and those offensive pass catchers along with him, that would have been something to see, and competing against also some of the best offenses in the league as well, all within one division. We might see like if that happens after he winds up leaving Green Bay after this season, which is most likely to happen. But either way, I mean, it's hard for me to get excited about any of the Broncos pass catchers because they're tied to two guys that one that can't get into the end zone and one that can't make it to the red zone so he can even have a shot at getting into the end zone.
I'm with you. And I don't mean this to rub salt in Rhys's wounds, but can you imagine Justin Fields there?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Look at his face.
On the bright side, we have Patrick Surtain to take sixes for us.
Yeah, he's great. Yep. All right, I've been saving this stat. Rhys, you know what my birthday is, right?
Yes.
I share the same birthday with both Teddy and Drew Lock.
Good job.
Really? Isn't that weird that those guys have the same birthday?
Yeah.
And that your dad has the same birthday.
There you go.
He's going to look it up. See, I'm probably old enough, both of those guys combined, but that's a different story. He's doing the math. What's your take on Taysom Hill and Jameis?
Now, with Taysom Hill and Jameis, I don't know what to think about that entire like New Orleans Saints offense to begin with. It's almost like my feelings about the Saints offense is completely agnostic of who's going to be under center, just because of the injury to Michael Thomas, which is like a whole other, I guess, like drama story that's like currently developing with, I don't know what's going on. Like he ghosted the trainers for however many weeks and all this other stuff. But regardless of if it's Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill, who are they going to be throwing to? We've been waiting for Traquan Smith to be something for the past like few years. Marquez Callaway has apparently come out of nowhere to be their wide receiver one. Adam Troutman, I mean, Dayton's finest, woohoo, still being used more in line than as an actual pass catcher because of his offensive line and pass blocking was actually the thing that the Saints coaching staff actually likes more out of him than anything else. And that's the way he was used in preseason. Any of the routes that he ran, I think either 60 or 75% of the routes that he ran were actually just out to the flat, chip block and run out to the flat. That's it. So I'm not getting excited about any of the offensive weapons or skill position players in the Saints. So if it's Taysom Hill, okay, fine. You've got the Konami code thing like working for him so he can get you some production. Jameis, we know what his game is and how he likes to play, like with his aggressive nature. So even if he does have, let's say, Alvin Kamara on one side to pass the ball out of, since like Alvin is an actual like dual threat, like a legitimate dual threat running back who can run like legitimate routes. What about the rest of his cast and crew that's going to be around him? And that's really, until I see that out there on the field, that's really, I have just like too many concerns to care about either of the two at this point.
I'm with you.
You mentioned Jameis Winston's tendency to chuck the ball down the field, but that's Traquan's game, isn't it? To get the ball 10, 20 yards downfield and then try to make a couple moves to get to the end zone, which Traquan Smith might end up being a little bit of a post-type sleeper just because he does have the potential to get the Deshaun Jackson games.
I think so. And actually, I thought that was how when Drew Brees broke the record, I think that was actually on a deep pass to Traquan Smith. He wound up scoring, I think, like either 2 or 3 touchdowns in that game when Brees broke the record. But it was on like one of those types of plays where he's looking like Brees looks to his first read, Michael Thomas wasn't there, looks to his second read, Kamara not there, looks down the field, there's Traquan Smith streaking down the field, pops him for like, he was like a 25 or 30 yard like touchdown pass, and like Traquan Smith takes to the house, that sort of thing. I can 100% see the same thing happening with Jameis Winston, like if Traquan Smith is up to the challenge.
So it'd be an Ashley Lee when he was with the Broncos type of season. I don't know if you were big into fantasy at that time, but Chris, he had a 50 catch, 1,000-yard season.
Really?
Which was crazy to me. You know, the average 20 a pop for a season.
Yeah, that's
Ashley
wild.
Lee with the Broncos.
Yeah.
Some of his old timers.
Mike Anderson.
Yeah.
There you go.
What else you got, Rhys?
So you mentioned, so we've talked about position battles, but what about some of the other players that you're just excited to see?
So one guy that I'm really excited to see, and it's another rookie, is Terrace Marshall for the Panthers. He's one of those, like the injury history that was associated with him. I know that was part of the reason why he wound up falling to the 3rd round, if I'm not mistaken. But I know there were a few of the draft analysts that had a mid to early 2nd round grade on him. So I can understand like why we're hoping to see like what he can do with the Panthers. Panthers last season, they were top 5 in terms of targets that went to their wide receivers. So we know that position group is it's a concentrated offense, like where they typically just focused on the wide receivers, and they've already got like good wide receivers there. I mean, DJ Moore is like one of like the top wide receivers in the league. Robbie Anderson getting de-Gasified, moving over from like New York, awesome fit. Like, and now regardless of what you think about Sam Darnold, I can at least see him being, I don't know, Teddy light, or at least good enough for that offense to function like under him, or at the very least from the preseason games, it looks like PJ Walker might be able to do an even better job, to be quite honest with you. But regardless, Terrace Marshall operating as that big slot like type of receiver, that would be exactly what they need right now. They're not getting anything out of their old tight end, or at least their previous tight end in Ian Thomas. I know Sam Darnold has some sort of connection to Dan Arnold, and that's what the preseason reports have been suggesting. But I want to see that 3 wide receiver set like in motion, like working together, because regardless of who winds up like moving to the slot or moving outside, but having a combination of DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and then Terrace Marshall, I think that would be actually like a pretty neat combo to see like out on the field on a week-to-week basis.
Plus McCaffrey, right?
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to McCaffrey. I mean, it's just like this offense, it's almost like the Denver Broncos. It's just like on paper, this offense could move, but we need to know like what type of quarterback play they're going to get in order to harvest the most value out of them.
I'll take Darnold over the Broncos quarterbacks most days.
It's not a bad proposition. It's just we don't know what to expect out of Darnold. We've seen so many other guys that, you know, have left the shadow of Adam Gase, wound up being at least decent for fantasy. I mean, even at the quarterback position, Ryan Tannehill, immediately after, you know, he moves from Miami, goes to Tennessee, becomes one of the most efficient like quarterbacks from an EPA per play standpoint. So it's entirely possible that Sam Darnold could do the same. It's just that we have so many years of Darnold being back in the league in EPA per play, back in the league in completion percentage over expected. We actually just saw, what was it, just last season, Joe Flacco come in for relief for Sam Darnold and perform better than Darnold in the same offense. So it just, there's so many things like pointing negative. I just want to say that if Adam Gase isn't a part of the picture, he'll do better. And with Joe Brady and Matt Rule, I want to believe. So it's just, I'm trying to put at least enough cautious optimism into Darnold as possible. But that's mostly because of I'm heavily invested in DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, all those other guys. So Sam Darnold has to be good in order for us to be excited about all the rest of the guys.
So 2 things. when you mentioned Marshall, he's reunited with Joe Brady, which is a positive.
Yep.
And so I wanted to get both of you all's take on quarterbacks that I think could go either way this year. And young quarterbacks could go either way. And I think their team's playoff hopes are solely hinged on their play. Tua and Hurts. I think that I need to see more from both. And you read as many of the reports or more than I do, Chris, and Hurts has a good game or a good practice, a bad practice, a good practice, 3 bad practices. Now he's on fire. Tua's taking shots deep. Oh, he throws too many picks one practice. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like we're watching a ping pong match and it's going back and forth, back and forth. Do you have hopes for either one of them to be special this year?
All of them. I hope that all of them are at least that they could be special. I mean, Hurts specifically, just because of the narrative, not the narrative, but his story, right? Like him coming in, replacing Tua, and just doing his thing like when he was still in college. I mean, bouncing to a different school, taking over there as well. I mean, the guy, at least from like a subjective standpoint, has really been that underdog.
Yeah.
And now he gets placed even in like a similar situation here at the professional level, where he came in last season replacing Carson Wentz as Wentz is imploding. It almost seemed like the entire franchise was imploding because of the problems with the head coach, the GM, the team owner, and just all this chaos surrounding him. And he balls out.
Yeah.
I mean, he has these like 300 plus yard passing games, shows off the rushing skills, and that at least gives the Eagles fans like something to be hopeful about. Now, from a statistical standpoint, I can see why there's some concerns. His accuracy like was well below like the median, like for rookie prospects. So regardless of what production he was able to do on the ground, at least his functionality as a passer need to be re-examined. And that's actually been one of the things that Nick Sirianni has put as the focus for Jalen Hurts: footwork, motion in the pocket, and so on and so forth, to work on his fundamentals. So I think that could work, but it's just we don't have any sort of confidence in his pass catchers. I mean, Jalen Reagor was essentially labeled a bust after his first season. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, he was already considered a bust from the previous class. I mean, his best pass catchers, Hurts' best pass catchers was either a running back in Miles Sanders or a tight end in Dallas Goedert, who's now been replaced by Zach Ertz because Zach Ertz is still on the field. So that whole team is just kind of, I don't know what to expect, but at least I'm hopeful for Hurts. I mean, similar with Tua, I mean, he's looked great in camp, like throwing shots downfield despite Devontae Parker getting injured, Will Fuller getting injured. Jalen Waddle was injured for a short time at the beginning of training camp. At least he's out there. I mean, most of his pass catchers have been injured, but he's been throwing darts to Albert Wilson, Allen Hurns for a little while until I guess apparently he just broke his wrist. So he's going to be out for, I think, if not the season, but at least for a couple of months. But the accuracy, I thought, was at least a part of Tua's games last year. I think still showcased what he could be as a passer. It's just that the production and the efficiency wasn't there. He was timid in the pocket, wasn't as mobile. I mean, all of those other things that you can contextualize away just because of the fact that there was no preseason. And he also had Ryan Fitzpatrick like breathing down his neck. So it's just, I think I can talk myself into why like Tua wasn't as productive as he was last year, but you could see all the poise and all the pocket presence that's a part of what his game is now. So, and you can see the team was already kind of seeing that beforehand. That's why they went out and got Will Fuller. That's why they wound up like drafting his former teammate in Jalen Waddle. So it's just like they made all these moves in order to actually invest in the quarterback versus the Eagles kind of did the opposite. I mean, they got Devonta Smith. I mean, don't get me wrong, but where's the other help that could actually wind up, putting more stock into your quarterback? But now, I mean, the Eagles are the team that's most most linked to Deshaun Watson, like after he leaves the Texans, not Miami. So it's just, I'm hopeful both of these guys like wound up becoming something special, but it seems like Hurts is the one that's the one currently in the bullseye for his teams. And I don't know why.
Philly's a tough market.
Yeah.
But even they haven't, Hurts has said that, or Sirianni, whichever one has said that we don't know who our week one starter is. And if it's Hurts versus who's their backup, Joe
Flacco.
Flacco, and
Yeah.
you don't know who your starter is, I believe that says a lot more than any statistic or film pass could he ever say.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, Flacco has won more awards than Hurts has.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a long time ago, son. Some of that may have been before you were born.
Flacco.
It could have been. Let's see.
When was his first Super Bowl, Rhys?
First Super Bowl was 2012, 2013. That's when the blackout happened. And
Yep, against the 49ers.
Oh, yeah. I say before you were born. You were born in 05. So you were in kindergarten at the time.
I remember watching the game too. Absolute chaos.
Oh, yeah. Rhys knows all this stuff. So I always ask him because I don't even worry about it because he remembers it. So as we wrap up, Rhys, any questions for our esteemed guest here?
Not off the top of my head. Do you have any, Dad?
No, I'm excited for this season. Now, I'll tell you why. Both of you guys, catch me on this. 20% of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL will be rookies this season. 5 out of 32. It's at 16%.
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah.
15, 16% are rookies. You throw in the ones that were rookies last year, and you're looking at a huge section, right? I'm waiting to see these young guns. We are all poo-pooing, oh, what's going to be like when Roethlisberger and Breeze and all those guys retire. The NFL's in great hands. Great hands with all these young quarterbacks.
Oh yeah, because when we were looking at the quarterback landscape maybe 2-3 years ago, when it was Breeze, it was Roethlisberger, it was Brady, it was Phillip Rivers, but we were kind of wondering who that next crop of quarterbacks was going to be from a fantasy perspective that we were going to try and latch ourselves onto, because Kirk Cousins, he really wasn't getting it done. Not too many folks were all too excited about him. Derek Carr, same thing. So it's who are the next QB1s going to be? And we quickly found them. Actually, who was I talking to? I can't remember off it. Actually, take that back. Peter Howard. If you don't know who Peter Howard is, go find him on Twitter at PA Howdy. He works for Dynasty League Football. There was a study that he ran that quarterbacks, the quarterback ascension essentially comes in waves, because because quarterback scoring is so flat, it takes at least some attrition at the position for us to start to see more quarterback ones start to come into play for us from a fantasy perspective. And it's typically just one per year that winds up moving from obscurity into the top 12. But actually over the last 3 seasons, it's either been 2 or 3. And that's because of the youth that's now being replenished. We're cycling out Drew Brees and we're getting Justin Herbert. We're cycling out Ben Roethlisberger and we're going to wind up with Trey Lance and whomever. But the problem is that youth is going to stop here soon, because it's not like we're super excited for Spencer Rattler and some other guys to come out in the following season. So it's just, while we are excited about youth and the Konami code and the mobility that they provide, that's probably going to hit a wall here in the next couple of seasons, because there's only going to be so many of these guys that can come into the league, get starting jobs, and be useful for fantasy. So we're going to have to watch that. But yeah, I think the league's in good hands with Patrick Mahomes and all the rest of those guys.
Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Even Russell
Josh Allen,
Wilson's
for sure.
not that old.
Yep.
Rodgers is one of those old guys, but we didn't mention Kyler Murray there's a lot of young guys out there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Shame the Broncos can't get one because we can't tank correctly.
Maybe next year.
Yeah. We always start week 14, 2-12, and we end up 4-12 or 5-0. Or if we always win the final 3 games, and we move ourselves out of 6 or 7 spots, so we can't get a quarterback.
That's just so your coach can save a job.
Yep.
We don't want them to save jobs after that.
Chris, it's great having you on back with us, and thanks for the